And now let me present this special program that we have here in the Hall of Philosophy. We are focusing on the theme, The Journey of the Universe, and we bring you today a notable roster of interfaith scholars. Today's distinguished guests are Rabbi Lawrence Troster, I never say it, Troster, right? I want to say people's names right. Heather Eaton, Safei Eldin Hamid, who will present the Abrahamic responses to the journey of the universe. The rabbi will lead the response from Judaism. He is a nationally recognized religious environmental scholar and leader, and we are grateful, Rabbi, for your presence here today. We look forward to your presentation. A co-founder of the Green Faith Fellowship Program, he has also worked as Rabbinic Fellow of the Coalition on the Environment and Jewish Life. Heather Eaton, who will follow with the Christian perspective, is renowned professor of theology at St. Paul University, Ottawa, Ontario, Canada. Professor Eaton is engaged in and committed to interreligious responses to the ecological crisis, particularly the relationship between ecological feminists and liberation theologies. And Professor Safei will complete the family of Abraham for us today with the response from Islam. Professor Hamid is a well-respected scholar of environmental planning, an educator of landscape architecture, and a consultant for international development. He practices primarily in the United States and in the Middle East. As we have stated, all of our speakers are responding to the award-winning documentary film, Journey of the Universe, which is the inspiration for this week's lectures. You will also be pleased to know that you can buy the DVD of the Journey of the Universe. A number of you have asked about this. Sorry that you missed the film when it was shown here, but you can get the DVD at the bookstore, and also the book of the same title, as well as the educational materials that will enable you to bring the wisdom to your religious organizations and your schools back home. Please know that our ushers also have flyers that will tell you how to access these materials online. You will be able to access a paper that looks like this, and you can't see it from way back there. It says Journey of the Universe at the top, and basically what it tells you is that the papers that are presented here will be available on the Journey of the Universe website, and it's journeyoftheuniverse.org. And you can have these, and you will also be able to get them online. We are counting on the fact that you're not just coming to listen to the lectures, but that you're taking notes, if not with your pen, in your mind, and promising yourself that when you go home, whatever is your home group, you are going to begin to organize on this subject. That's a promise we have to make to one another. And so we are extremely pleased to be able to present this week of scholars to you. And once again today, I thank Warren Martin for the support that he has given in making this possible. The Eileen and Warren Martin Lectureship Fund is for emerging studies in Bible and theology. And nothing fits better, and I think Warren would agree with me, than today's and yesterday's and tomorrow's set of lectures in this very, very important subject. So thank you very much again. Would you welcome, thank you. Would you welcome today's scholars, and Rabbi, would you begin?
Thank you. It's a real pleasure to be here. I'm honored to be part of this program. I want to thank Mary Evelyn Tucker and John Grimm, who've been friends and colleagues for many years, for including me in this, and for the Chautauqua Department of Religion for inviting me to be part of this as well. I'm going to take off my watch so that I don't go over time, but you've probably heard that if you see a rabbi taking off his watch or her watch, it means absolutely nothing. You've probably heard that about your ministers too, right? Well, this morning I had the pleasure to visit the center of the universe. My wife and I walked over to the Palestine Park, and I ascended the hills and stood near Jerusalem. And for many centuries, many people have felt that Jerusalem is the center of the universe, symbolically or literally. And no, that idea of sacred space is but one aspect of a larger nexus that ancient Israelite religion proclaimed and was later embodied in the Jewish tradition as well. And the best representation of that I have found is actually in a play written in 1914 by the Yiddish writer S. Ansky, that was his pen name, his real name was Solomon Rappaport, called The Dybbuk, or Between Two Worlds. The Dybbuk is set in the 17th century, and it's a folk tale of how a young bride is inhabited by the spirit of a dead yeshiva student who had been promised to her originally, but then she was going to marry somebody else. And in the play, a tzaddik, or Hasidic holy man, is named Reb Arielka, is called upon to exorcise the spirit of the dead student from her. Now we're introduced to Reb Arielka at a Malava Malka, which is a post-Sabbath celebratory meal began by Kabbalists. And he gives a Devar Torah, or a homily, about the sacred hierarchy of God's creation. And I'm not going to read you the whole thing, I'm going to paraphrase it, but essentially he goes through the various axes of holiness. He begins with the idea the whole earth is holy, but the land of Israel is holier, Jerusalem is holier, the temple is holier, and the holiest place of all in the world is the Holy of Holies in the temple in Jerusalem. And then he says, every human being is holy, but the people of Israel are more holy, and the tribe of Levi is the holiest of the tribes, and the holiest amongst them are the priests, and amongst the priests, the holiest one is the high priest, called in Hebrew the Kohen Gadol. And then he talks about time, how every day of the year is holy, but among them the most holy are the sacred holidays, and the Sabbath is holier than that. But the holiest day of the year, the Sabbath of Sabbaths, as it's called in the Bible, is Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. And then he talks about languages, how there are all these languages in the world, and Hebrew is the holiest language, and the holiest work is the Torah, the Pentateuch, and the holiest part of the Torah is the Ten Commandments, and the holiest word in the Ten Commandments is the name of God. Now, in the ancient temple, once a year, the high priest entered the Holy of Holies on Yom Kippur and uttered aloud the name of God, the four-letter name of God, often referred to as the Tetragrammaton. And he says, at this immeasurably holy and awesome moment, the high priest and the people of Israel are in utmost peril, for even a single sinful or wayward thought in the high priest's mind at that instant might, God forbid, destroy the entire world. And this 20th century representation of these axes of holiness, in fact, represent an idea that goes back thousands of years to the Solomon's temple in Jerusalem. This holiness structure originated in what modern biblical scholars call the priestly theology that is found in the Torah, mostly in the books of Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, and Numbers, and dates to the First Temple period, which is before 500 BCE, but some aspect of this theology is also found in some of the Psalms that exalt the holiness of Jerusalem. This is called the Zion theology. And even though the temple was destroyed in 586 BCE by the Babylonians and then rebuilt and then destroyed again by the Romans in 70 CE, this holiness structure has been symbolically maintained in Jewish ritual and liturgy So, for example, Jews pray towards the east, towards Jerusalem. All over the world, Jews face towards Jerusalem to pray. And synagogue internal architecture is meant to symbolize the temple. The Sabbath is still considered holy. Yom Kippur is considered the holiest of holies. Most Jews in their liturgy still use Hebrew, and we read the Torah in Hebrew, and the name of God is so holy, we don't pronounce it anymore. In fact, nobody's quite sure how it was pronounced. So, and even the concept of redemption looks forward to a time in a messianic age when the temple will be rebuilt, restored, and this sacred hierarchy will be renewed. Well, the question that we have to ask ourselves as moderns, and I do as a modern, I identify myself as an eco-theologian, is how can we maintain these ideas in light of what modern science has shown us and which the movie Journey of the Universe has shown? After all, the idea of a sacred space in an absolute sense really can't be maintained. Modern cosmology has shown the universe has no center, and certainly the Earth is not necessarily in a privileged place, even of its own galaxy. Modern scientific research into the universe has led, as it says in the book Journey of the Universe, to a series of decenterings about our place in the cosmos. We now know the universe is unimaginably large and cannot be pictured in the way it previously was. And unlike the biblical idea of creation, which is essentially a static cosmos, we know that our cosmos is constantly in process and is a dynamic entity. Even on the earth, sacred spaces usually derive from a particular culture's conception of itself in relation to the earth, and not some objectively observable difference in matter. In the priestly and Zion theologies in the Hebrew Bible, yes, Jerusalem is the center or the navel of the earth, the place of the first land that emerged from the primordial deep on the third day of creation. And how can we maintain this anymore as some kind of objective truth? The idea of somehow humanity, any form of humanity being privileged, is both implausible and immoral. And the discovery of DNA has shown there are no essential differences between various ethnic and religious groups in the world, and even between humans and animals. We know, for example, that there's only a 4% genetic difference between humans and chimpanzees. And so we know that because of Darwinism, there are no essential distinctions also between life and non-life, according to many modern Darwinists. Life arises from dead matter as a result of the laws of physics and chemistry. So evolutionary science has thus collapsed and in some sense reversed the sacred hierarchy which used to put humans at the top and then animals and then plants and then matter. What now is true is that what is lowest has become what is most fundamental. The other thing that modern science has shown us about this is, of course, that we're all made up of stardust, which comes from the Big Bang. We can say the same thing about time. Every culture has its own measurements of time. And although the ancient Israelite culture did in fact have what we might call natural measurements of time, such as days, months, lunar or solar years, the priestly theology, which wrote Genesis chapter 1, has one of the most unnatural forms of time, which is critical to the expression of this theology, namely the 7-day week. There's no natural phenomena that can be connected to the 7-day week. And yet, this is embedded deeply in the first chapter of Genesis in many, many different ways. It's the result, it's the basis of the Sabbath, the Jubilee year, the sabbatical year, and so on and so forth. And lastly, how can we say that there's any sacred language? Hebrew itself, by the way, is a relative latecomer in the family of Northwest Semitic languages. And neurobiology has now shown that all perception is a subjective filtering of the experience by the brain. Although the language that one speaks shapes one's worldview, the idea that one language can be the language of God seems preposterous. The idea that God even speaks in human language was in fact repudiated in many Jewish theology, even as early as the Middle Ages, and modern Jewish theologies of Revelation assume that the written text of the Torah is not the actual word of God, but a human-created record of the divine-human encounter. And yet this sacred nexus is the core of Jewish creation theology going back thousands of years. And creation is one of the central ideas of the Jewish concept of divine action or providence that has been codified in the rabbinic liturgy that's the heart of all Jewish prayer books. So can we in fact claim this? Are we not, because of science, more likely to say, as the physicist Steven Weinberg has said, the more the universe seems comprehensible, the more it also seems pointless? Well, I personally believe that we can reconstruct a creation theology that can reintroduce new ideas of sacredness. Now, I don't believe the old ones are going to go away. They're still going to be maintained by many Jews in their practice. But I think it's time to take cosmology and evolution and biology seriously in order to understand our relationship to creation as the basis of our environmental ethics. And this is what I have been trying to do ever since I got started in the religious environmental movement now almost 30 years ago. So one of the things that I've learned is that a creation theology is not just invented out of the blue. It does come out of a deep sense of what one might call echolocation, but it also is to respond, perhaps, to a particular crisis, spiritual, social, or even political, in the life of a religious community. And some people say, among other things, for example, that Genesis 1 is a response to the Babylonian creation epic, Enuma Elish, which sought to embed Babylonian religious, political, and cultural dominance over the peoples of their empire, to which the priestly theology in Genesis 1 said no. And there are other creation texts in the Hebrew Bible, Genesis 2, Psalm 74, the last chapters of Job, and even the wisdom tradition have their own perspectives on it. So I could go through also other Jewish forms of creation theology, but what I want to ask, which is the central question, what is our issue? What is our issue that demands a new creation theology? And I think it's a specific response to this idea that the universe is pointless, that the vastness of the universe and the great deal of deep time of the universe can, in many people, evoke the idea that nothing in our earth is really important, that we are not important, that I don't matter in the larger scheme of things. And I think that while the old creation theology certainly on a certain sense has been repudiated, nonetheless I think it is possible to rebuild it. And I think that there are three aspects that are important to a new creation theology from a Jewish perspective. One, that there has to be an idea of order, an order in creation. In the first chapter of Genesis, God at the end of the 6 days says that the creation is very good. In Hebrew, tov ma'od. And the Hebrew word tov not only means good in our normal sense of the term, but also sufficient. So in other words, just like the Goldilocks story, it's just right, okay? But there is in Jewish theology the idea that creation is not a single act, but an ongoing activity of God. And this continuous emergence is understood to be a divine renewal of creation, which is actualized in human procreation and the earth's fertility and production. This order also represents a community of all life and all creation, which is found, for example, in Psalm 148. I also believe that a key idea is that the emergence of this order was the intentional and not random act of a creator. It does not require an intelligent design theology to believe that this order comes about by some sense of intention of the divine creator. And that intention can include not only laws of nature, but even randomness and contingency. And lastly, while the purpose of the universe is not definitely known, it can be assumed to be a form of divine actualization. The presence of God is expressed in creation, in the creation of the natural world, and the evolution of conscious observers. So I have not been traumatized by the journey of the universe. I have been inspired to rethink this, to understand how the unity of the universe and its origin and makeup and its continued deep interconnectedness is in conformity, what I believe, with some classical Jewish ideas. And the process of how the universe emerged, that it starts in a primordial chaos and evolves into complex structures, is exactly one of the central messages of biblical creation stories. And I don't believe that the size of and the age of the universe minimalize the meaning of life, but they have been shown to be an essential element for the emergence of life and consciousness. So in a certain sense, we are at a special time and place. And how matter evolves into life, and life evolves to express mind, and then mind produces language, spirituality, and culture, this too can be developed into what you might call a sacred loop or holiness loop of unity to order, to life, to mind, to order, and back to the understanding of unity. I could say a lot more, and my paper does, but I want to turn back to Ansky's text to conclude. Ansky, at the end of Reb Arielka's Devar Torah, added probably what his own little universalist bit, because it is theorized that the Devar Torah, the homily, was something that Ansky actually heard in a Hasidic synagogue during a research trip as an ethnologist in 1912 in Eastern Europe. But he added the following. Rabbi Arielka, after saying what I read before about how if the high priest doesn't do it right, the whole world could be destroyed, he says, every piece of ground on which a person stands when he raises his eyes to heaven is a holy of holies. Everyone created in the image of God is a high priest. Every day in a person's life is Yom Kippur, and every word which a person speaks from his heart is God's name. And that concept of every place, every person, every word, every time, in fact, is reflected in the rabbinic rebuilding of Judaism after the destruction of the Second Temple to make a Judaism that could live without such a temple. One last thing. In Isaiah 65:17, there's a prophecy that begins, "For behold, I am creating a new heaven and a new earth." Now, some of you may have heard this phrase because it's also used in the book of Revelation. In fact, it was a very popular idea in Jewish apocalyptic literature in the Second Temple period, which the book of Revelation is part of that tradition, that somehow the old creation is wearing out and God's going to, bring the Messianic age and completely new heaven and new earth. Well, I certainly don't necessarily believe in that, but in some ways, modern science has indeed given us a new heavens and a new earth. In the vast new knowledge that has grown over the last 300 years, and which would be inconceivable to our ancestors. And I believe we can indeed renew creation with this new story of the journey of the universe. It's my hope that the journey of the universe will not only educate, but inspire many others to do the same. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you to all who put this together, and a particular thank you to Mr. Martin. To this beautiful land and this lake, we owe gratitude. And my comments are about Christianity and the journey of the universe. And I have three basic comments. So the Journey of the Universe project brings us into new science. We learn a great deal about science, from the origins, the Big Bang, to the present. But we also learn about the breadth and the depth and the dynamics of reality. And historically, scientists and religious thinkers have shared this quest and these questions. So prior to the scientific revolution, Christianity and science were in alliance. A cosmological horizon was integrated into Christian themes and provided a blueprint and oriented us to the larger dimensions of our lives. If you know the work of Hildegard of Bingen or Thomas Aquinas, for them, the earth and the entire cosmos were alive, and they were alive with the presence of the divine. Thomas Aquinas said that errors in reasoning about the natural world led directly to errors in reasoning about the divine. Then we have Galileo that begins by saying the earth is not the center of the universe, and this causes the beginning of troubles for Christianity. We see the rise of Western science. The earth, once alive, was now seen as mechanistic and passive and void of spirit. Over time, Christianity no longer collaborated with science. Christianity avoided addressing the major scientific discoveries, such as evolution. Christianity became ill-equipped to deal with science, and I would say Christianity has narrowed, focused on correct beliefs, biblical inerrancy, sin, and an otherworldly salvation. So Christian preoccupations have strayed far from cosmological and earth sciences. Now here's a test. Where is this quote from? "Every man has the right to be all he can be and to know all he can know." People, the Chautauquans, this is actually the founding speech of this place. Now, it's wrong, it's an error in reasoning because every woman has the right to be all she can be. But this is what the journey of the universe is doing. It's giving us the right to know all we can know and be all we can be. The journey of the universe tells us what the best science is, how we can understand the universe. How can we understand the earth and its development? How do we understand the expansion of life? And most importantly, how do we understand ourselves within these dynamics and ingenious processes? So the first thing the journey of the universe does in its exchange with Christianity is reinvigorate a conversation among cosmology, evolution, and Christianity. And this is a new moment of understanding, because now we realize we are embedded in these cosmic processes. We arose from Earth. In fact, we are Earth, and we are part of a community of life on Earth. And this Earth and its biosphere are in a deep crisis. So from a religious point of view, the journey of the universe opens us to a new religious awakening. My second point, there are both affinities with and challenges to Christianity when we bring these two together. So as Larry mentioned, there's a group of people called eco-theologians in the monotheistic traditions, and eco-theologians tend to bring together science, evolution, and the ecological crisis. And we all use similar tools. Mary Evelyn spoke of them years ago, of retrieval, reinterpretation, and reconstruction. And these are different tools, and I just want to give you one example of each. So in general terms, Christianity focuses on the fall, on redemption theology, on sin, on salvation, and on morality. And to a great extent, Christianity has forgotten another theme, creation. So we need to retrieve it. And it's an old theme in the Christian tradition and in the Jewish tradition that all of the creation reveals the divine. And we need to learn from creation, attend to it, listen to it. But today, in order to do that, we must learn science. So we have different examples of this from all over the world. In this part of the world, you would have stewardship. In Africa, it would be earth keepers. In Australia, it's care for creation. There's another tradition of creation in the Christian, throughout the Christian tradition, and that would be that the universe is sacred, and that there's a sacred dimension to the earth. And we look to the works of Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, who said we live in a divine milieu. So we need to know the ways of creation, and from that we need science. So this is an old theme, but we're in a new moment. And the journey of the universe invites us to understand that. and that there is coherence and unity, and both coherence and unity in all dimensions of reality, and both science and Christianity can affirm this. And a great deal of things happen when we let this infuse our consciousness and infuse our spirit. A second example would be reinterpretation. Christianity has focused a great deal on justice. How many of you have done justice work over your life? I would imagine a lot. So Christianity has a strong focus on justice. But we can reinterpret it to eco-justice, that ecological and social issues are connected. As mentioned several times, economic, social, and ecological issues are connected. We can speak of environmental racism or ecofeminism. We can talk about preferential option for the poor being preferential option for the earth, as does Leonardo Boff. We can talk about ecological sin, as does Patriarch Bartholomew. So there's a great deal of work that can be done in reinterpretation of Christian ethics and justice traditions. The third example is on reconstruction, and this is more challenging. In the Christian tradition, images of God, humans are in the image of God, women and men, but can we enlarge this? Primates, other mammals, other animals, the earth community, all of this is in the image and likeness of God. Can we take the strong Christian focus on community and enlarge it to earth community? When we do this, it renews our religious energy, it renews our religious imagination, and it opens us up to a different dimension of religious experience. I think we need to ponder in this reconstruction work of what is our image of God? Is our image of God absent or present? Is it static or dynamic? Is God elsewhere or is God everywhere? How we image changes how we live. What if we looked at incarnation? Christianity has a strong theme of incarnation, which means that matter, in fact, matters. So can we enlarge incarnation to the earth community? We can take other dimensions and other themes in Christianity. We can take prophets. Who are prophets today? We can take the wisdom traditions. We can take Trinitarian theology. So eco-theologians are working on all of this to either retrieve, reinterpret, or reconstruct. Some of this work is easy, like stewardship, and some of it is much harder, earth community. Because earth community challenges anthropocentrism and challenges some of Christians' traditional teachings. Now, we could say this is difficult, impossible, but I just would like to remind you that 50 years ago, we would not have been able to say that Christianity could be reinterpreted to support the equality of women. Now, I'm not saying it's actually the champion of that, but it has been transformed. So religions are much more fluid than we think they are. They have much more interpretive capacity than we think they have. Christianity has taken nature out of the equation. But how do we put it back in? If we put nature back in as a set of resources, we're with a utilitarian ethic. And that's not strong enough. That's not what the journey of the universe is about. If we put it back in and say, isn't the natural world beautiful? That's just another form of utilitarian ethics. It's much more than that. It's much more profound because we are nature. We are embedded in nature. And what happens to the earth community happens to us. So the journey of the universe is calling us to task on these points. And my third point is, I think the journey of the universe opens us, in its intersection with Christianity, opens us up to spiritual insights that I think are perhaps old, but they need to be renewed, and some are new. If you watched the film or read the book, you'll know that there's an emphasis on coherence. There is some kind of coherence from the origins to the present. That it's a unity, but it's not the same. It's highly differentiated. It's interrelated. It's interdependent. There are different processes, but they are mutually influencing. And the second part is that we emerged from these processes. And we belong to this earth. This earth is not where we live, it's our home, it's our origins. Now, Christianity promotes a view that we don't really belong here, that neither our origins and maybe our destiny is elsewhere, that we are going to be saved from this life. Teresa of Avila said, life on earth is a long stay in a bad hotel. And then there was a bumper sticker in the parking lot of my university that had the iconic picture of Earth from space, and then it said, Jesus, don't leave Earth without him. So once I got released from jail for smashing the car, I'm here. But I think these ideas dull our senses. They dull our senses to the Earth community. They dull our senses to the suffering on the Earth community, to species extinction, water pollution, and whole ranges of ecological problems. It dulls our senses that we are Earth. It also prevents us from awakening to the universe, to these astounding processes that the journey of the universe is inviting us to learn from. Otherworldly spiritualities dull our senses to evolution and to our kinship with animals, and I would say it dulls our spiritual senses. So the journey of the universe is a project to awaken us, both scientifically and spiritually. When we ponder in depth the expanse of time and space, Earth dynamics, evolution, and our very recent emergence from these processes, we have to realize that we are not the reference point. And secondarily, our religions are not the reference point. So I want to say, what do I mean by our religions are not the reference point? I think the journey of the universe pushes us to think more about our relationship between religions and the journey more than retrieval, reinterpretation, and reconstruction. I think hidden in the Journey of the Universe film and book invites us to say, what is the nature of religion? What are religions trying to express? So I'm going to experiment with a metaphor. If we were to imagine religions were like languages. So religions are a language about human experiences and images and intuitions about something more, other dimensions of reality that are not immediately apparent. In the monotheistic traditions, we use the language of the sacred, the holy, the divine, or God. This is the language of the monotheistic traditions to express this. Yesterday, we heard from Dr. Grimm about indigenous traditions. Tomorrow and Friday, we're going to hear Buddhist, Jain, Hindu, Taoist, Confucian. We're going to hear all these languages. Now, if we were to ask the question, how many other than religious languages have ever been spoken on Earth? Just anyone give me a guess. 6,000. Okay, we'll go with that. Which one of those 6,000 is true? Okay, so if religions are a language, could we not ask ourselves which one of these is true and then realize what an idiotic question that is? Now, Christianity has a very strong habit everywhere it goes around the world to say, we're true, this is true. And Christians have a habit of arguing endlessly about which version of Christianity is true. How do we deal with biblical authority, with Jesus, Christ, the Trinity? I mean, we have killed I don't know how many trees trying to figure this one out. But Christianity also rarely steps outside and realizes there are many other religions, many other languages with great insights and teachings. And all of these great religions represent a thin layer of culture over a vast expanse of nature. Christians argue a great deal about what to believe, but isn't the question how to live? Isn't the question today, what spiritual insights will allow the Earth community to live and flourish? Many, many spiritual images that we have come from the natural world. So in the Christian tradition, we talk a lot about water. Water's the source of life. Living waters, still waters run deep. You will become a fountain of living water. Water is like a mighty river, or longing for running water. The World Health Organization and the United Nations and even the World Bank know that within 15 years, 2/3 of the world's people will not have enough water. And this does not include animals and plants. We have to connect our spirituality, our images of water, to what's happening to the planet and water. There's a disconnect. So my last comment. The disaster data, the ecological disaster data, is overwhelming. And analysis is not enough. We need a vision. We need a vision that inspires and guides us. And as Christians, we say often, without a vision, the people perish. The journey of the universe expands our vision, and it orients us in the vast dynamic cosmos. Evolution teaches us of life and the processes of the biosphere. It teaches us who we are in the scheme of things. And this evokes wonder and awe. And wonder and awe are profound religious energies, and some would say they are the heart of religious experience. And if you ponder for a moment that every single leaf on every single tree for millennia has been different. I mean, this is wondrous. It creates radical amazement. Rabbi Heschel says, what we cannot comprehend by analysis, we become aware of in awe. So I would say for Christianity to be relevant in an ecological era, it must be both transformed and transformative. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Safei Eldin, and I'm very pleased to be here. And thank you for inviting me. Thank you for everybody who is here. And I would like to give a special thank to my friends, Mary Evelyn and John Grimm, for actually including me in this event. I also would like to thank my wife, Linda, who is sitting here, because she encouraged me all last week when I'm actually going through a very severe case of sinusitis, which almost stopped me from coming here. And but with her encouragement, and I think I made it. A friend of mine I was introduced to here just a couple of minutes ago, and greeted me and said, "Assalamu alaikum." So I would like to greet you also with the same words here. Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum is a word in Arabic which Muslims use to say, peace be upon you. Peace be upon all of us as we enter this short journey. 15 minutes, I would like to cover a huge topic, which, I thought Mary Evelyn and John are good friends, but they said to me, 15 minutes you can cover, and we know that this will take 15 weeks. What does Islam think of the universe, and how it would respond to our elegant universe as the name of this conference, and of course the beautiful movie we all have seen. When I first came to this country 40 years ago as an immigrant from Egypt, a friend of mine in the office told me, "Safei, if you want to have the Americans love you, don't speak about religion or politics." So I'm taking a risk today because I have to speak about religion. That's the assignment. And part of it also will be politics. So forgive me, and I hope I will have friends here at the end. Of course, Islam is a new phenomena in the United States of America and in the West. And it will not be an exaggeration to say what many scholars have written already. It is the most misunderstood thing to Americans. Islam is, and probably the most misunderstood message and the most misunderstood man on the history is Muhammad, the Prophet. So, how to respond to all of this in 15 minutes is and start to tell you what the contribution or what the reaction of Islam about the universe and all of this. I will cut through very quickly to what all Muslims, and of course, as we know, 1 out of 5 on this earth today is a Muslim. We cannot really marginalize that fact. 1 out of 5, 1/5 of the whole human population. So it really matters to understand these people and this culture. So I thought I will give you at least the principles of that paradigm. Seeing the universe through an Islamic eye will start from one aspect, and all what I'm going to do is just to highlight verses from the Quran, the holy book of the Muslims. That there is absolute equality between all creatures. All creatures, not all humans. The verse from this 4th chapter of the Quran says, "And there is no creature on or within the earth or bird that flies with its wings, except that they are communities like you. We have not neglected in the register a thing. Then into their Lord they will be gathered." That's the first principle. So looking at nature, looking at insects, looking at the mountains, all creatures are equal nations to humans. No superiority and no inferiority. The second aspect of that paradigm, the Islamic paradigm of looking at the world, is emphasized by what was the first revealed word from God to Muhammad. It was one word: read. Read in the name of your Lord who created man from a clinging substance. We are talking now, 14 centuries ago, addressing a man who was illiterate, who did not know how to read or write, and God is revealing to him a word about the sperm, the clinging substance. Recite, and your Lord is the most generous, who taught by the pen, taught a human that which he knew not. So part of the paradigm is absolute respect and obedience, that in the journey of life, reading and learning is a priority, a top priority, even for the people who don't know or don't know how to read. And not only listening or reading, but understanding. Again, in the chapter 3 of the Quran, indeed, in the creation of the heavens and the earth and the alternation of the night and the day are signs of those of understanding. So we are talking about receiving knowledge or information and start to contemplate to reach the point of understanding, not just retaining. Another aspect or another activity which are urged upon every Muslim or every believer is to observe and to notice and look deep. Say, and that's in chapter 10, observe what is in the heavens and the earth, but of no avail will be signs or warners to a people who don't believe. In other words, people at least have to be neutral when they are making their observation. But a person who made up his or her mind, this kind of observation probably will not reach anywhere. There is also urging for reflection. Then do they not reflect upon the Quran? If it had been from any other than God, they would have found within it much contradictions. Now, there is something I want to digress here to talk about, which is the Arabic language. The Arabic language, having, of course, grew up as an Arabic speaking, and now for the last 40 years speaking only English almost. The Arabic language is a very rich. The vocabulary is 10 or 15 times much more than any other language I have been exposed to. And therefore, there is a specificity in the meanings and the ability to point and differentiate and distinguish between things. But there is one verb or one term which is used for two reasons or for two meanings, which is ayah. Ayah is used, this is probably one of the few words in Arabic which one word with two meanings. Ayah could be a verse of the Quran, or ayah could be a sign in nature. The sign in nature. In other words, when they say look at the ayahs, look at the signs of creation, or what is behind that. So when we study, for instance, the anatomy of the humans, or the kingdom, the wild kingdom, or the plant kingdom, and the complexity of it, there should be some signs for us to see. Another thing is why humans were created, the purpose of life. The purpose of life is God who has created death and life to try you, which of you work the most good. So life is a journey of knowledge and journey of testing and trying. Who will do better on this limited time, limited space of the life? Why or what is the role of humans on earth? This also is a very clear in Islam. And when thy Lord said unto the angels, this is the second chapter of the Quran, and when thy Lord said unto the angels, lo, I'm about to place a Khalifa, a vice regent on earth. Khalifa is a trustee, Khalifa is a steward, Khalifa is a vice regent. So the role is clear, at least in this second chapter. And it is repeated in other chapters. Chapter 10, 2 or 3 times. And then to emphasize the importance of other creatures and why they are considered equal nations, equal to humans. We did not create, that's chapter 44, we did not create the heavens and the earth and all between them in play or in vanity or in a useless way. No. We did not create them but for the right ends. But most of them know not. Most of us really don't know much about the value of this particular species of plants or this particular species of animals. We are discovering every day something else. And we are hopeful that cancer and Alzheimer and Parkinson, and all of those things, that the treatments will come from one of those species which we are hoping to preserve and not to destroy. As an umbrella for all of that, God is telling all of us that He will show His signs. We will show them our signs in the horizons and within themselves until it becomes clear to them that it is the truth, which is the journey of all of us, to find the truth. But it is not sufficient concerning your Lord that He is over all things a witness. There is one thing also I would like to go back about the Arabic language. The Arabic language is a very poetic, very romantic, and the terms and the composition will not reveal, it's not as specific and technical and scientific like English. As we always say, English is very easy to learn, very hard to master, because it is very limited in its vocabulary. The Arabic is not. The Arabic is very hard to learn and very hard to master. But it is very specific if you master it, that there is no shades about terms. But with the romantic nature of it, the meanings reveal some kind of, not generality as much as different interpretation at the different stages. And that is why probably that first verse about the clot, the clinging clot, was not understood to many people. Now we understand it with our knowledge of gynecology and all of these aspects of medical sciences. So there are plenty of other things which actually Muslims and non-Muslims need to look and contemplate. These were written 14 centuries ago, but only now we can understand it. Let me give you an example. About the spherical nature of the earth, which, if we remember, the Soviet astronaut who went first and looked at it and he said, I saw this sphere hanging, talking about the earth. This is something very impressive, hanging in the air. Well, in chapter 5, the Quran talks about He makes the night overlap spherically the day, and He makes the day overlap spherically the night. We are talking about people who, of course, at that time thought it is flat. So they could not, at that time, appreciate what spherically means. We now understand it. Or that we know that the shape of the earth is not a perfect ball, not perfect. It is much more ellipsoid or egg-like. And in chapter 30 of the Quran, it says, وَالْأَرْضُ بَعْدَ ذَلِكَ دَحَّاهَا. Well, means the earth, God has made the earth or extended it to look like an ellipsoid or egg. Egg, actually. Dahiyya in Arabic is egg, to make like an egg. Well, at that time, probably, and for the last maybe centuries, they did not interpret this verse. Now, Muslim and non-Muslim scientists, astronomy scientists, are looking at this and see something else. In chapter 27, talking about the swimming of the earth in its orbit. As you see the mountains, you think they are firm and static, but they pass away as the clouds. Well, what did they think at that time? They probably interpreted as maybe that will happen in the day of judgment, when God will explode things and the mountains will be flying. But we know now that the whole earth is flying with its mountains as well. And then, of course, you see more in chapter 17, when the revelation comes about the winter and the summer solstices. He is the Lord of the two east and the two west. To that simple Arab person 14 centuries ago, this did not mean anything other than maybe sophisticated language, the two east and the two west. But actually, we now know that there is a place for the sunrise during the winter, which is very different from the one. With that, I have the last word I would like to say. I think that Islam as an ideology and as a body of knowledge is capable of providing a holistic view of cosmology and a practical approach to deepening our knowledge of the universe. Thank you very much.
We want to thank our speakers. We have about 15 minutes for questions. I would ask you, so that we get a little energy from this, that you ask a short question of one person. And we will not have, if all three answer a single question, we'll run out of time. So let's try for a short question, focus it, and I'll ask our responders also to try to give a sharp answer. And I'll have to stop you in about 15 minutes, so do make note of that. Let's start over here.
Mine is a quick question, but it's not to one person. It's actually a very encouraging question. I'm going to ask the audience how many, and I come from Toronto, Canada, how many of you have heard President Obama's speech to the Georgetown University yesterday? How many have heard it? If you haven't heard it, it lasts 48 minutes, and I believe President Obama must have been here in the first 3 days to have put that speech together. It's marvelous, and it's very encouraging environmentally. It's a
Well, it's almost quick. I work in a department which uses animals as a surrogate, and we had a debate for 3 days as to which animal represented human beings more, pigs or baboons. On the third day, finally someone got up and said, I don't know what you're arguing about. Some people are like pigs, and others are like baboons. I work in a department of about 60 people of all different religions. Hindu, I have a pseudo-Zoroastrian, several Muslims.
Question.
I'm getting there. And no one in that group has any problem with either religion or science. And so, like that group, do you really think there's a problem there? Because you're not going to convince anybody by the preponderance of the evidence that there's an issue. Some people accept religion and science, some people don't. So, the question is, do you think there's a problem there? Is there any reason to present all this stuff out there to say, hey, there's not really a problem when you're not really going to go anywhere?
First of all, there are a lot of religious people where it is a problem. And I think what we are all trying to do is to say that the new knowledge has deep implications for who we are, what we believe, and our relationship to the earth and the meaning of our existence. And I think I've found that some people just don't want to think about these issues, so they kind of keep it in their mind in two separate spaces. You know, they've got their religious space and their scientific space, and they really don't try and let, you know, the twain shall not meet. What we're trying to do here is to say, no, we need to have them meet. We need to have them talk to one another, and they will renew each other. Science will be enriched by a spiritual perspective, and spiritual communities will be enriched by the scientific perspective.
I have a question for Rabbi Troster, actually. I'm sorry, you just sat down. I feel bad. But I was taking notes while all of you were speaking, and Rabbi, you said that in response to the issue that the universe is pointless or, you know, like people don't matter, you had 3 points. The first one was the idea of the order in creation. I didn't catch the second and the third one, and so I was wondering if you could repeat those quickly for me.
Okay,
I'm
sorry.
sorry.
Sorry if I didn't make that too clear. You know, trying to take a 15-page paper and put it in 15 minutes is a little difficult. Number 2, that the emergence of order was an intentional, not random act of a creator. And thirdly, the purpose of the universe is divine actualization.
Okay, thank you.
My question is, well, it can be answered by any of you, but my thinking, or what it evoked for me in all 3 presentations is, it seems to me that one way to reclaim, reimagine, enter into the journey of the universe is through ritual, because so much of ritual has a connection with nature. So any one of you who wants to comment on that, I'm more familiar with the Christian tradition, but any one of you who wishes to maybe even just use one ritual as a way for us to reconnect, not just through our heads, but through our hearts.
That's a really important question of the power and the richness of rituals. The only thing I would say is that our rituals have to be larger, more potent, and if I think of Christian rituals, often they are enhancing our sense that we don't belong here. So rituals, the content of the ritual matters as much as the format of the ritual. So, but if religions are symbolic language, the symbols have to be alive in people's imagination. They have to be active in the community, and they have to have some kind of potency to them. So the question at the ritual level is, what symbols are going to strengthen our capacity to be members of the Earth community? So I agree with you that rituals are very powerful, but flat rituals do very little, and otherworldly rituals they're destructive.
Thank you.
Briefly, in Islam, the rituals, although I said, of course, earlier that learning and contemplating and reflecting are as important as prayers and fasting and observing other, but it is necessity for a Muslim to actually, as a part of his or her rituals, to know, for instance, when is the sunrise exactly, when is the sunset exactly, when is the dawn exactly, because based on that, the 5 prayers are observed. Based on that, when is the moon, the first crescent appears, because based on that, they will fast or they will go for pilgrimage and so on. So there is an intermarriage between science and rituals.
For Heather Eaton, I wonder if you're familiar with the research that's going on about Jesus' words. The Bishop of Liverpool, the Anglican Bishop of Liverpool, and his work to show that, for example, the term that's unfortunately translated as Son of Man is really child of earth, a child of Adam, and that Jesus referred to that as his major self-designation, and how much that might enrich us. Or for St. Francis, who took Psalm 148 and called all creations, brother, sun, and sister moon, to praise with us, with God. I wonder if you're familiar with the research that's going on to try to rehab our own Christian tradition.
Sure. There's that work, and there's all kinds of work on the meaning of stewardship. There's all kinds of work on the meaning of the human as part of the earth. So, we can spend a lot of time retrieving and reinterpreting these words. I have a question of how useful that is. I'm not saying it's good or bad. I'm just saying Christians and historians can spend a long time doing that while we lose another 65,000 species in a couple of years. So there's an issue about are we retrieving these words because we think actually the Bible has the ultimate truth? Are we retrieving words because this is what fuels the Christian imagination? I just think there's a lot of questions about retrieving. It's the same as the Jesus Project or the Q Project. There's all kinds of work being done like this, but almost none of these people actually have an ecological sensibility. So that's just a question I raise about not whether it's right or wrong, but whether it's useful or relevant. And I just want to say, I neglected to mention the ritual question. There is a whole Earth Mass that was put together at St. John the Divine and with the music of Paul Winter to try to raise people's understanding of the journey of the universe, the cosmic context, and the role of the human in ritual form for Christians.
The Bishop of Liverpool did his research precisely as an act of eco-justice.
My question is to all three. This is a discussion, I assume, on evolution and cosmology becoming. And we're all involved in various religious sects or belief systems, most of which include the idea of soul. Could any of you suggest when soul came into evolution?
I have a response.
Are you asking literally when did a soul develop in humans?
Well, yeah. I mean, was there one family of apes that, they had children and they had souls? And I know I'm not being sarcastic. It really is a serious question. But how do we have a sense or a knowledge that, well, first of all, we all just assume that humans have souls.
Do we?
And, well,
I'm not sure that's true.
Okay, then it's not a valid question in that respect.
Go ahead.
I think the word soul is a really difficult term. I mean, and I know that the monotheistic traditions have had this notion of a soul, which is a kind of disembodied true essence of ourselves. But that actually is not in the Hebrew Bible at all. In the Hebrew Bible, what's often translated as soul means life force. And the ancient Israelites believed that the breath of God, the actual, what we would call a kind of energy, is inherent in wind and light, and that God breathes it into us, but it goes away when we die, and that's the end of it. In fact, in Ecclesiastes, at the end of Ecclesiastes chapter 3, and the book of Ecclesiastes is probably written in the late 4th century, early 3rd century. Ecclesiastes knows about this idea of a soul that seems to be entering into Jewish thinkers from Greek influence, and he specifically rejects it. And he says, we're no different than animals, he says. We both come from the same place and go to the same place. And who says that our ruach, our animating spirit, goes up? He was a good, in that respect, although he was influenced by Greek philosophy, he was a good Israelite Jewish thinker in that regard. So I think that it's one of those things that in modern theology has really been questioned because it results in a dualistic idea that soul is superior to body and therefore spirit is superior to matter. And I think that that's not good from an environmental perspective.
This was also a question which was asked from the Prophet of Islam, Prophet Muhammad, and he did not know the answer, but he received the revelation later on in a verse. One verse was very, very short and concise, which repeats the same theme I mentioned before. It says that, of course, the thing about soul or the spirit is a matter of God, and you humans have little knowledge. In other words, he did not dispute that one day we will find out, but it is again the continuation, probably in the future we will find. But with the limited knowledge at that time and probably at this time too, our knowledge cannot reach it.
One more question.
I'm proud to belong to a congregation that has been officially declared a green sanctuary, and I don't know if that's something that perhaps the religions that you represent might be able to do and sustain. And I just want to make a comment and a suggestion that we've talked about wind and water and animals and birds, but we have to protect our seeds. Food safety is a serious, serious issue, just like water.
The organization I've been working for at Green Faith has been working with congregations now for 20 years, and there are other important, both denominational as well as interfaith organizations such as Earth Ministry in Seattle and Interfaith Power and Light across the country, the National Religious Partnership for the Environment. There's been a lot of work with individual congregations by religious environmental movements, either from a specific denomination or from an interfaith perspective, and there is a lot of material and a lot of programs available for congregations to green themselves. I also just want to mention one thing about the seeds that I think you'll like. In Israel, in the Negev, there's a place called the Arava Institute, which is Israel's leading environmental institute, but also desert ecology. And there's a plant biologist there named Dr. Elaine Solway, originally from San Francisco, who was given some seeds that had been found in the excavations of Masada, which means they're 2,000 years old. And she is precisely researching how long we can keep seeds fertile. You know, there are seed banks in different places in the world. There is one in north of the Arctic Circle in Norway, and it's kept under, and she germinated one of these seeds. 2,000-year-old seed. It started to grow. It's a extinct species of date palm that was quite common in Judea 2,000 years ago. So Jesus probably ate from a tree like that. And the tree kept growing, and now it's so big, it's been moved outside in the backyard, or the yard it's called the Methuselah tree. And to me, that is a remarkable symbol of what Jews call tikkun olam, our ability to change and repair the world. And many people that I've shown, if I had a PowerPoint, I'd show it to you, have been inspired by this. That's human science and ingenuity. Human science and ingenuity have brought about a kind of resurrection. And to me, that's a great symbol of what we're at.
All right, these two young folks are just looking like, please. All right, I'll make a deal with you. Both of you ask a question quickly, and we'll ask the answerers also, because we have to vacate this place before somebody else takes it. It's not about the good questions and the good answers. Quickly.
Okay, I have it written. So what would be your thoughts on modern science's abandonment of the sacred dimensions of physical reality, which has more or less caused humans to relinquish his or her function as stewards of the environment?
Okay, did you hear that question? Yes. Okay.
To anyone.
Question.
Joan, my question is actually going to be for you, for the purpose of being succinct. Is it possible to create some sort of a forum for our presenters and other people to list recommendations for ways to organize, or organizations that are already working politically or in other ways to increase this awareness and move our country forward into taking care of the earth?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
And we're going to talk about that. This is a question we talked about at breakfast this morning, and we said we have to move from the here to how we're going to make things happen. And there are many organizations at work, but we need new energy. And so we will try to get compiled for you, at least in the small way that we know, some of the ways in which some of the things you can plug into to put your energy into this issue. And thank you for asking. You want to say, okay, let's get his question quick, and then you want to come up, Miriam?
Slow down. Of course. What would be your thoughts on modern science's abandonment of the sacred dimensions of physical reality, which has more or less caused humans to relinquish his or her function as stewards of the environment?
You want to come up?
That's a really big question, but it's similar to the previous question of, why is there an issue between religion and science? And, science is all kinds of things, but it has become quite reductionist and has become quite mechanistic. And, if we listen to some of the scientists we heard speak in the morning, their knowledge is extraordinary, but their rapport with these realities, I'm not sure how strong it is. So we can have the most extraordinary scientific knowledge, but no rapport. So when we bring in science and spirituality together, we realize that there's an interconnection and there's a rapport. If we don't have a rapport, we don't have any ethics or relationship. People do not protect those things that they don't consider to be sacred. So there's something about a deep rapport between humans and the natural world that needs to be reestablished. That's coming from some scientists, but now we're trying to engage religions on the same thing. So I think that's one way forward. Mary Evelyn's going to make a comment about the question about resources.
So, closing words. So, both of these questions relate to the two large and inclusive projects that we've been working on for several decades. One is World Religions and Ecology, where we've done books. There's a huge website, there's conferences, there's a book on every religious tradition, Christianity and ecology, Judaism and ecology, etc. These have all contributed to those or edited those volumes. On that website, if you Google religion and ecology, there are hundreds of engaged projects on the ground. So if you go to Christianity and ecology, you will see probably 125 different projects all across the country. To Joan's point, nationally, we need to reinvigorate this, but on a grassroots level, there's a lot happening, which is very positive. As well, if you want to be part of this Forum on Religion and Ecology, and some of you already are, you can sign up for the website, and we send out a monthly newsletter of what's happening, conferences, books, activities, etc. So go to Religion and Ecology, just Google it, and you'll find this website. Our wonderful web mistress is here. Do you want to stand up, Elizabeth, who manages this huge website? Thank you. To the other question here, this is exactly why we made Journey of the Universe, that the sense that science in some of its forms has stripped away the sacredness of the universe. And that's why we're trying to suggest we want to reinfuse it with this huge, complex project that everyone has a role in. That's what Journey of the Universe is exactly about, a response to that question. Okay, so there's flyers up here, John has them, join the forum, and I want to again thank Joan, who set up the National Religious Partnership for the Environment, and I think will help reinvigorate it in the future. She's going to thank the panel. I want to thank her as well.